Hello again. Hey, so I moved my hoop again. So I'm in a new section and I wanted to show you the corner piece. Okay, so I was talking about quilting the corner piece to make it look like it's just a little square that I pieced in there. I don't know why it looks a little puckery right now, but I may go down the line and keep making little lines to make it look like they're all little squares, but I did the corner to make it stand out. And now I'm quilting lines up through here. I'm gonna do like every couple inches. I'm doing that in black thread because I didn't want the white thread sticking out as much. So you can see it, but the black thread is more hidden because I just thought it would, look better with black thread. There you can see it a little more, maybe. All right, going to show you right here where I drew a line. It doesn't look that straight to me, but I'm going to take that pin out and straighten it up. I found a little bunchiness underneath it, so sometimes the material will move a little bit and it'll get bunched up. So then you can take your pin out and straighten it up a little. All right, so I am going to quilt this little line I drew with my little blue marking pencil. And when I'm done with it, I just rub across it with this or a piece of cloth, and the mark pretty much disappears. You don't really see it. So that's a nice thing. This is a bigger needle than I normally use for quilting, but I had it sitting out, so I just thought I'll use it. It was already in my thread, so I just kept it out and used it. Normally I use a shorter, smaller needle than this. It's a little stiff, but I have broken needles after I used them a while, just from doing the rocking motion. It puts stress on the needle, so you can snap them in half, which I have done. So be careful with that because it can either stick in your quilt when it snaps in half, or it can pop out and go flying a little bit. Usually it sticks in my quilt, but I have had them pop out if I just am starting the stitching, and sometimes it'll just fling right out. So yes, you can break your needles. Okay. I have this one done. Can you see the stitch? Sometimes I feel like it's hard to see it just because I did do it in black, but sometimes I just want to hide this. I just want to have the stitches not as noticeable. So if you do it in a white thread on a black background, it's going to stand out more. Or you could use yellow if you wanted, because the bees are yellow, but then their wings are a little bit white, and this little swirl is white. So it wouldn't hurt to do it in white, but I just sometimes like to have the thread not so noticeable, that's all. And I'm doing this in white thread, but I did try before in black thread, and then you don't see it as much either because the background's black, because I was just outlining each little edge of the flower. But if you go down, you know, each petal, you will see the black more, and then it does make the flower stand out a little bit more because there's black outlining each petal. But as I said before, that's everybody's individual preference as to how they quilt with and what they quilt with, you know, colors of thread, how much quilting you do, the boldness of the thread, because this is actually a bold white thread. It's for bold hand quilting, it says. And this is just a regular quilting thread. So I do not endorse any particular type of thread, or I've used a lot of different varieties of thread. I just, sometimes I like the looks of a bold quilting thread, and you can get them from different manufacturers. And sometimes I like the look of the regular quilting thread. The bold thread makes the patterns stand out more. So, you know, it's just a thicker thread, and it will make your design stand out a little bit better, that's all. So, you know, each thing has its own drawbacks, actually, because the bolder quilting thread, I feel, gets more knots in it, and you have to stop and straighten your knots out. So it's, you know, up to you what you use, what you like. I am looking to see where I ended my stitching last, to see where I need to stitch in the ditch, and that would be right here. Sometimes I do use a long piece of quilting thread, just because if I have a long area to quilt, as this is a very long area, then I will make my thread long. But the longer your thread, also the more chance you will get knots in it as you quilt. But I mean, you can get knots in a short piece of thread too, but I will use a longer piece of thread just so I don't have to keep cutting it off and starting it over. Because if you use too short of a piece, then you're starting over quite a bit. And I have a few loose threads here that I need to trim off, because when I was piecing it together, I had to tear a couple of these sections out. And there's another one. And I didn't get all the bits of thread pulled out of the fabric when I took it apart and re-sewed it. So now I'm finding loose threads that I have to keep picking out and cutting off. Alright, so here's my little needle puller that I showed you in my last video that helps me pull the needle through. Well, Now, here's one of those little knots that I was talking about. It got in my fabric. I don't know how they start, but I take my needle and hold my thread down. And as you heard that pop, that was the knot popping out of my thread, because you don't want to leave your knots in, or you're going to have little loops where you stitched. So you don't want little loops sticking up where you're stitching. Okay. Sometimes it's nice just to do another thread I need to cut off. Do a quilting video in silence. I've done those. I have quilted quietly and without any talking, except for, maybe the very end. But sometimes those are nice just to do, and then you can sit and concentrate more on your quilting, because you're not talking and trying to quilt at the same time. Because when I quilt, normally I don't talk and quilt, I just quilt. All right, here we are close to the edge, so I'm going to stop right there and tie it off. Okay. All right, so I'm going to take my scissors and cut that. And move on to another spot. Tie my thread again. Okay, I'm going to do this stitch right here. There we go. You pull the knot through, you can hear the little popping when you pull it through the three layers of fabric. You want it to go between the layers so it's hidden. And then you start your stitches again. Now right here I can feel more thickness in this stitch because the layers of the seam line must be all bunched up right there, and so it's a little thicker and it's harder to pull the needle through. So I'll use my needle puller to help me with that. Like that. See, right there, it's not too bad because it doesn't feel like there's as much fabric right there. Okay, that's where I'm gonna stop and tie off the thread and cut it. All right, ready to start another section. So I'll probably come down here and I'll do this stitch And I'll do the very end of the border here. And then I'll finish working in these two sections, and I will quilt around these flowers and do the rest of my diagonal stitching in the bees as far as I can go, because I'll have to move my hoop over to finish this corner here, because this is the one bottom corner. So we're at 15 minutes. Okay then, I am going to bid you adieu and say good day. I will talk to you again, and you guys keep quilting and have fun doing it. All right, bye.